Hello and welcome to session 249 in the AISafety.com reading group. Tonight we'll be discussing the less wrong post, MIRI announces new death with dignity strategy by Eliezer Yudkowsky. Eliezer Yudkowsky is the founder and senior researcher at the Machine Intelligence Research Institute in San Francisco, and this is a post on less wrong which was posted on the 1st of April this year, and that date is not a coincidence, it's literally tagged April's Fool. It is, of course, called MIRI's strategy, but it doesn't have very much to do with MIRI, and it's not really a strategy in the sense where you think about they are changing from agent foundations or something like that. Eliezer Yudkowsky starts out with an overview of the strategic picture, which is very, very bleak. MIRI didn't solve AGI alignment, and at least knows that it didn't, and it's in past tense, so as in this is a done deal. Paul Cristiano and the eliciting latent knowledge and the prosaic alignment, it's incredibly complicated and it has no chance of working in real life before DeepMind destroys the world. That's also a rather damning assessment of what mostly of DeepMind, but also of Paul Cristiano's schemes. I think complaining that they are incredibly complicated is not my first objection towards this. They are not that complicated, at least most of them are not that complicated. But the problem rather is that we are unable to secure any kind of strong arguments why they would be likely to work. That's the problem with them, not the complexity. Eliezer Yudkowsky presents an interpretability scenario which is very dark, where there is in fact a speculative warning being given by interpretability research, and even that is claimed that that's something we're probably not going to see. And even if we could get a speculative warning in this scenario, then it's not accompanied by any kind of fix. There's no suggestion for how we could align the system. And faced with this warning, management decides to basically press on and ignore the warning for four reasons. The first is that they are uncertain of this is a speculative warning. Is it actually true that the AI is plotting to destroy us all? The second is the question of whether it will act on these intentions. The third is a race dynamic that we are seeing, where if they don't build it, probably someone else will do it very soon. And finally, some kind of fatalism, where if AI is going to destroy us, then there's nothing we can do about it, so we might as well go ahead. In order to understand the rest of the blog post, the concept of logistic success curves or logistic functions is central. So let me start by to explain this. Start by using an analogy: building a bridge. If you want to build a bridge, there is a projected cost. Let's say it costs $10 billion to build a bridge. There is some variance. There is some history. Maybe sometimes they go above budget, sometimes below. And if we try to graph that, where we on the x-axis have the cost in logarithmic, so 10 to the x, and on the y-axis probability, then we can identify some numbers. Like I just said, that the bridge has an estimated cost of 10 billion, so that means 10 to the 10th gives us a 50% chance of success. Now, if we have less money, we might only have 10 to the 9th, so 1 billion. What is the probability that building this bridge will turn out to cost 1/10 as much as projected? I think that happens very, very rarely. I've just written 1%. And symmetrically, if we get 10 times as much money as we expect to need, so we have enough money to build 10 bridges instead of one, what is the probability that at least one of these bridges will actually be built? Well, I've put it at 99%. So that's kind of the motivation behind logistic success curves. And one thing we should notice in particular is, what if the budget is much, much lower than what we expect to have to pay? Like once we are at 10 to the 7th, so 1/1000th of what we expect to pay, basically the chance that we can build a bridge and pay only 1/1000th of what we expected is basically 0. So that means we have a graph that for the first from x0 to 7 is basically indistinguishable from 0% chance of success. Here we have a logistic function. As you can see, it has a we have the input here. Like if we get 10 to the 20th, then 99.9999. We can make it. If we get $100, we can almost certainly not build the bridge. This has a midpoint. I've put it at $10 billion, so 10, and has a growth rate, which is basically the slope of this curve. And it's of course reality that determines how this function looks in reality. One of the things we will notice is that the distances, when you go from one point to another point, it's not like we get an additive, a linear increase in the probability of success. We get a multiplicative relationship. So if we go from here to here, we double our chances, and from here to here, we double our chances, here to here, we double our chances, etc. And of course, the claim underlying this is that this logistic success curve is a good way of looking at the alignment problem, that we will we don't know precisely how the curve looks because we've never done it before, but there is probably a level of effort where we are really certain we'll make it, and a level of effort where we are really certain we will not make it. On this logistic success curve, Elias-Yudkowsky believes that we are far underwater in the basement, so very far to the left, to the point where we in fact have just about 0% chance, and that's really sad. And it can be hard to get motivated and stay motivated, because even if you work as much as you can, the probability of if you double the probability that humanity will make it, well, we've just gone from 0% to 0%, and that's still 0%. So the expected value of all of your incredible work is nothing, and that's kind of demotivating. And that's why Elias-Yudkowsky is suggesting an emotional reframing, where we are not trying to improve our odds of making it. We are helping humanity die with dignity, or at least we are working so humanity dies with more dignity than we would otherwise have had, because Elias-Yudkowsky is clearly seeing us on a very undignified on a path to a very undignified death. Another way of framing this dignity is like, it would be a better look on our tombstone if we died with more dignity, if we had some better probability of making it. Let's talk a bit more about dying with dignity. You can imagine an interpretability researcher such as Chris Olah. Right now, I think Elias-Yudkowsky seems under the impression that he's working at DeepMind. He's right now working at Anthropic. But this researcher, if he was not working on interpretability, then it's much more likely that no one would try to generate a warning and fail, even if Chris Olah ends up failing. And it's more dignified if, as in his scenario, management of the project that killed us all are warned in some way that the project will kill us all. It would be more dignified if many people, like Chris Olah, was doing something that could perhaps have worked to generate a warning, but did not in fact do that in real life. And this phrasing didn't actually work in real life, or variations on that happens a lot in this text. And that's of course underscoring one of Elias-Yudkowsky's main points, that there is a substantial difference between things that could work out in theory and things that actually end up working in the real world, because the real world unfortunately is far more complex than the theories that you can just make up. And the least dignified way we could die would be in total ignorance, no warnings, and no one even trying to figure out how we could get a warning. How about the Machine Intelligence Research Institute? They have a dignity too. It's not just the human civilization, but also the Machine Intelligence Research Institute has a dignity in how much are they contributing. And they are sad. They're sad that it looks like we're going to fail, and Sudikowski is sad, but they're not sad that they have tried, because from a dignity point of view, it was important that someone made a serious effort in case the problem just wasn't that hard. It would have been counterfactually less dignified to die and not knowing if all it really took was a serious effort. And that's it gives kind of a new intuition on MIRI's logo. You can imagine time flowing upwards. So here is the singularity of AGI, and the paths here are the possible human paths through the future. And there is like one that is orange, one that's green, and then 80% of the paths leading away from the singularity are dark. And so with the implications that we have died. I haven't thought of this interpretation before, or nor read it anywhere. So that was the dignity of MIRI. What about the dignity of Earth? Well, it's not looking good. Right now, Earth steers brilliant kids towards theoretical physics. That was actually my personal, when I grew up, I read about all these wonderful things that theoretical physicists did, and I thought that sounded really interesting. I would love to do that if I was very smart, and it turned out I wasn't very smart, so I went into computer science instead. But what I should have been going into, of course, would have been AI alignment, and that's what, in particular, the brilliant kids should have been doing. And, of course, many of them are going into quantitative finance or things like that. But Earth's dignity is not zero. We don't have no dignity, because when we die, there will in fact have been people who know why we are dying, it's not the problem is not solved, because the people who know will not be believed or will not have the influence that they need. Most people will choose to listen to someone else who is winning some kind of political game, but that's not really the crux of the problem. It's not really a problem of politics, because even if we had politics done much better, we haven't actually solved the alignment problem, and that just means that even if the first couple of projects decide not to destroy the world, eventually there will be one who is careless enough and for strategic reasons pushes ahead too far and then gets us all killed. I'm not entirely sure I agree with I certainly don't agree with a complete split between the political problem and the technical problem, because if we had some kind of, let's say we get a proof of this AI is misaligned in some sense, that would both be a very strong technical result on the way to solving the alignment problem, and would also have a strong political advantage. So these two problems, in my view, are somewhat related. A slightly better technical solution will, or better technical work, even if it's not a full solution, will make the political question easier. We could, in theory, imagine dying with even more dignity. Like interpretability research could have been better, to the sense that we get some really strong warnings. That's dying with more dignity. If we, instead of doing nothing, then try an alignment scheme that is really has a very low chance of working, that's a lot better. And if we do this sufficiently better, we could, instead of right now dying without a serious effort, we could die of the social and technical problems that are really unavoidable. So it looks like right now we are just not taking this problem seriously, so we'll die without trying some relatively trivial things, but we could die trying even where we have done the trivial things. And perhaps, just maybe, if we find something in the future, some miracle, some way we are wrong, some way we are surprised, that make things easier rather than harder, then perhaps we could take advantage of this miracle. That's going to require a lot of sanity, it's going to require a lot of preparation, and of course the luck that there is a miracle. But taking advantage of this miracle depends on dignity. And so this hints of a definition of dignity, like dignity is something that allows us to take advantage of a positive model error. And in principle, it would even be possible for us to not die. But Yudkowsky does not mince words, because that's not how real life works. In real life, we die. Why we won't be saved? Well, first of all, there are probably a large number of ways we are wrong about AGI, because we don't have an AGI, we haven't seen it at all, and it's possible that many of our theories are just basically wrong. But when you're fundamentally wrong about a domain, he uses the analogy of rocketry, then that doesn't mean that your rocket does exactly as you want, just using half as much fuel. What happens is that the rocket explodes in a way you didn't predict, because rockets are machines where everything needs to work, and if you're really confused about building rockets, you are not going to the moon. In particular, model errors make your life more difficult almost always, but not always. The social problems, the political problems are also more likely to become harder in the future rather than easier, because when people become scared, they will probably make worse decisions. I'm not entirely sure that I believe the problem so much is that people make bad decisions right now. I think the problem mostly is that people are not making decisions at all. So the way I predict the future is more that we will see, instead of right now where we are seeing nothing, in the future we might see something which is probably going to be bad decisions, but different in kind. Now Yudkowsky introduces dignity points, and that's from we had the desire to die with more dignity, because if we can't actually survive, then dying with dignity is something that we can in fact achieve. And if you help humanity die with even one more dignity point, you yourself die with 100 dignity points. That's a bit stingy. I expect that someone who helps humanity substantially and towards preventing existential risks is indeed someone who is worthy of way more dignity. That's of course and he's also later claiming that if you help humanity go down with even slightly more of a real fight, that is to die an extremely dignified death. There is a definition here: a project that doubles humanity's chance of survival from 0% to 0% is helping humanity die with one additional information theoretic bit of dignity. This is really quibbling, but I'm not sure information theoretic bit is the right framing for dignity points, in that they are points scalars, and bits are units of information in the information theoretic sense, and I don't think that's what dignity points are. But you know me, of course, I will digress a bit on dignity points and try to look deeper into the definition. So Yudkowsky gives a literal definition of dignity points. They are measured over humanity's log odds of survival. That is the graph on which the logistic success curve is a straight line. Now let's have a look at that and try to go through some simple examples. So I have first in Excel typed up some examples of probabilities, odds in text, odds ratios, and what are the log odds. We'll start with some of the odds that we normally have about. Like here's 50% probability, that's odds 1 to 1, and 1 divided by 1 is 1, and the log of 1 is 0. And if we have 20% chance of success, that is 1 to 4, and the odds, which is an odds ratio of 0 to 25, which is -2. So compare the situation where we have even odds and we have 20% chance of making it. That is 2 dignity points down. Now we can be more pessimistic, which is clearly Elias Yudkowsky, and see we have like 1 in 20, 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000, 1 in 10,000. That is minus 13 dignity points for our civilization. Let's try to have a simple calculation. I think the most negative number I could find, if I dig through all the bad news and update it fully on those and not on all the good news, is 1 in 100,000 odds of making that. So that is 1 to 99,999, which comes out to minus 16.6 log odds. And if we want to obtain 1 dignity point from that, well, then you take this and you just add 1, and that comes out to this odds if you exponentiate it, and that's this ratio, and that is this probability, which is kind of the double probability, because the difference between this number and this number is basically nothing. So at least for small numbers, talking about the probability and the odds ratio is basically the same thing, and that suggests an easier way of looking at this, or at least an alternative way of looking at this. Because if we have, this is the logistic success curve, here is the analytical expression for the logistic success curve, and most people, I would claim, don't think about probabilities and they don't think about odds ratios, and that suggests that people are probably interpreting this mostly as the logarithm of this. So let's see what is the logarithm of this function. Well, this is it's this graph here, and as you can see, it is for small probabilities basically a straight line. So that's also what Elias Yudkowsky was talking about, that if you double our chances, you get a fixed number, you get 1 dignity point. Again, this is log of the probability and not log odds, and this interpretation suggests that if you believe that we are probably not going to make it, if you are 99% sure we're not going to make it, well, 99% sure, that is this number here, that is minus 6 minus 6.6 dignity points, that is somewhere around this level. If you believe we are at this level, then the expected utility of improving our odds is really, really bad, but you get quite a few dignity points. So someone who believes that we are almost certainly going to die is gonna love dignity points, because emotionally they provide something you can actually achieve, something that is positive, whereas someone else might believe that there's a 90% chance we'll make it. And if they think about probabilities, not log odds, then they'll see us up here as so, and there is a going just a marginal improvement around the 90% probability of success is worth a huge number of expected utility and very few dignity points. So it could be argued maybe that people who think we are doomed love dignity points, and people who think we are probably going to make it, they will not be motivated by dignity points. Maybe. This is I've spent too long time on this to call it a hot take. But I'm not putting a lot of weight on this. This was basically a digression. Let's move back to the rest of the post, which is structured as a dialogue between Elias Yudkowsky and an anonymous questionnaire. I've put the using a color inverted picture of Elias Yudkowsky for the person who's making the question. So the first question is, dying with dignity. Does that just mean we accept that we are going to die and not try to fight a hopeless battle? And Elias Yudkowsky answers no, because that does not increase the log odds of our survival. Elias Yudkowsky is sad that we're going to die, and claims he fought hardest when we were in the more sloped part of the logistic success curve, where something could have been changed. It's not something he regrets, but he burned himself out to some degree and is taking some time off now. It is certainly true, if you fight marginally longer, you die with just marginally more dignity. And that is indeed dignified. The undignified thing is deluding yourself about the outcome or the probable outcome. And so here we see undignified being used mostly about the process of deluding yourself. The second question is, if someone has the questionnaire claims to have a clever scheme for saving the world, and states that he should, asked if it's correct, that he should act as if he's going to succeed with this, even though there are really, really strong arguments that this is misguided and doomed. Because if it doesn't work, then we're all dead, and then nothing matters, right? Elias Yudkowsky answers no with an exclamation mark, because that's not dying with dignity. And before he dives into the real arguments, he starts out with a heuristic for how to generate the answer that to this question, and that is that it's not dignified to die in this way, because what you are actually doing is stepping out of reality into some kind of mentally safe zone where things are going to go well, instead of being in reality. And it's more dignified to die with your commitment to reason intact, and keep searching truth and not abandoning it when things look dire. I love this picture. I found it on the internet. I think it's really symbolic. The person here is objecting to the heuristic answer and wants the real answer. Like all the utility in the future lies in worlds where the scheme that is being suggested is working. So why not just focus on that? And Elias answers that that is in fact not how the surviving worlds look like in his expectations. The surviving worlds are ones where people try to live inside reality and stare into reality with grim determination and try some way to shape up their impossible chances. I'm not English is not my first language. I'm not entirely sure what shape up means. That's like sizing up, looking at what are the chances or improving the chances. And the surviving worlds are ones in which a miracle happens, and people are positioned with resources and in particular sanity. So this part of not deluding itself is crucial. That allows them to take advantage of the miracle. Whereas if you make assumptions about that your scheme is going to work, then very often you will need several, and you make a lot of assumptions, and you get very, very far from reality. It could be said that if you want to make this kind of improbable assumption, it could in theory work, but you can only make one of them ever, and that's probably not what people who are going to do this are going to make. I think it's nice to see this spelled out, but I would really have liked to see this argument compared with the argument for specialization, which very often looks very much like this. Very often people who, like, if you want to specialize in, I don't know, AI safety via debate, it makes sense to some kind of live in a world where the success and failure of AI safety via debate is the crucial thing. Like, in order to specialize on just working on AI safety via debate, and then hopefully someone else will be working on other research agendas. So it's not the same argument. I would have liked to see some kind of comparison between the two. So because I do believe specialization is really important to get anything done. AGI alignment is Murphy cursed, is one of Elias Yudkowsky's arguments, and that's to be understood as in I believe Murphy's law was originally proposed in not quite in rocketry, but in something like experimental jet engines, where someone called Murphy made the law that if anything can go wrong, it will go wrong. And a Murphy curse domain, like Murphy's law, probably doesn't happen literally for everything in most domains, but a Murphy curse domain is one where pretty much everything that can go wrong does go wrong. So what do you need in a Murphy curse domain? You need mathematics. Mathematics is the only way to ensure that things cannot possibly go wrong. And that points very much towards the Agent Foundation's agenda that MIRI has been pursuing and are finding too hard, unfortunately. I would also add here that Murphy-cursed domains might not make a lot of sense if it's something that can be tested. And a domain is only Murphy-cursed to the extent that testing is impossible. So the two examples are rocket prototyping and computer security, which are also somewhat Murphy-cursed, but less so than alignment. Because we have a scientifically unprecedented experiment in AGI, and we have optimization pressures, and some of them are working against us. The real ones are indeed the ones working against us. We cannot really predict what intelligence greater than ours will do by almost out of principle. We need to hit a relatively small target, and we have a lot of things that can break and extreme factors, and we have no way of really testing things beforehand. So if you have a really clever scheme that really looks like it's going to work, not just to you and me, but also looks to Eliezer Yudkowsky like it would work. Well, in this case, AGI alignment is so Murphy-cursed that even if it looks like it's going to work and you can't see a reason why it shouldn't work, then it has a 50% chance of working in real life because the domain is just super hard. If you have something that you are much less certain about, only have like some moderately weak arguments, like 40% chance that it would work, then if you put something like that up against a truly Murphy-cursed domain, then it has 0% chance of working in real life. And worse, a lot of these schemes are in fact actively harmful. They're called harebrained, usually actively harmful, and the reason given is they're invented by the kind of people who come up with unworkable schemes, obviously, and try to get rid of them with counter arguments like, if it doesn't work, then we're all doomed anyway. The problem with, and the main way they're harmful, is they drain resources away from projects that are not harebrained, organizations that look into reality, people who look into reality and try to take advantage of some kind of miracle. I'm not very happy about this part of the article because I find it insufficiently specific. We need to have some kind of precision in being able to distinguish what schemes are misguided and unlikely to work, and which are actively harmful. The three parts that's being used, the three arguments or criteria, is they are self-reported as clever, there are strong arguments why they're doomed, and strong arguments why they are misguided. None of this is really enough. I think you probably want to burn some kind of common in order to have a truly actively harmful scheme. To some extent also because if you're pursuing a scheme that is misguided, then in the course of pursuing it, probably you will learn something more. If nothing else, you would on average expect to learn that it is in fact misguided. Third question is, should we have a breakdown and wail of doom in the streets? And Eliezer Yudkowsky with dignity also has a good argument that this is not very dignified at most. Somewhat darkly, very darkly indeed, he suggests that you have a private breakdown in your bedroom or a breakdown with a trusted friend if you must. And the problem from an expected utility point of view is that if you go wailing in the streets, you'll associate belief in reality with people who are also unable to control their emotions. Actually, this is a rather large subject. How should rationalists deal with emotions? Quite a lot has been written by this, also by Eliezer Yudkowsky. It's a big subject. And the reason here we don't want this is because we still need to think strategically, and if we associate belief with in reality with being stupid, then that worsens our strategic position. There is the opposite suggestion, hiding the grim truth and just pretend everything is fine. That also doesn't seem very dignified. Eliezer Yudkowsky has some poetic language about how we should go, and also thing that in practice, people who deceive others generally also deceive themselves to some extent. They don't live in reality. And another problem is that if good people are liars, that means that other people can't really trust. If rationalists go around lying, then people can't trust rationalists, and that will hurt us a lot. And that will in particular hurt our ability to coordinate with each other, and of course also other people. So for that practical reason, it's a bad idea to lie about and pretend everything is fine. There is quite a digression here from Ilya Svitkowski, stating that this line of argumentation is generally used by people who don't understand consequentialism or utilitarianism. I haven't seen this argument very much, so I can't really have an opinion about whether that is actually true. I expect Ilya Svitkowski has seen many people make this kind of argument. The fifth question is on extreme actions, or rather, the questions are not really clearly delineated in this numbered way that I've made them. So this is a question of, will Ilya Svitkowski do something that makes it unsafe to be around him? And he says no, he will be relatively safe to be around. Because why would you do something extreme and something unethical, which is still not sufficient to save the world? There is no extreme unethical actions that would save the world in actual reality, because the thing that needs to be done to save reality is not extreme or unethical. It's basically to look reality hard in the eye and do some very hard alignment research, and there's no unethical thing you could do that would actually save the world. You could try to, like, politics could have things that are extreme and unethical, but they don't save the world. So Ilya Svitkowski will be relatively safe, at least like safe in the sense that he won't cause you to die, but you will die. I thought about this, whether I should speculate about what are the extreme and unethical actions we might be talking about here, and I think Ilya Svitkowski, by not discussing them, are trying to establish some kind of overton window and saying, we will not talk about this kind of thing here among right-thinking people. And that's why here, even though I was thinking about making a digression about what extreme and unethical actions are available, then I will not speculate on that. Unfortunately, some of Ilya Svitkowski's self-proclaimed fans might not be quite as safe as him. And he says, in that case, he's going to teach them whatever it is I know. So he is indeed putting non-zero weight on this. He has, like, the simple arguments that are being presented here with just the expected utility calculations is in fact something that he has written about, like, not very much, but also not a little. There is some warnings against following expected utility calculations off a cliff. That's something that you definitely shouldn't do if you're not really sure what you're doing. He also states that in his culture, he is perhaps even quite different from his fans, in the sense that he's grown up with libertarian science fictions, works of science fiction, where one of the things that differentiates heroes and villains is when the going gets tough. Do they then just abandon their ethics, or do they really stick to their ethics even when it's hard? And sure, it's possible that if you tell people the truth, there could be panic, and panic can disrupt the plans, and in that way be bad. But this is not what's going to happen in reality, because there is in fact no plans that can be disrupted. So in that way, panic doesn't necessarily mean that we have a lower chance of success. I must admit, with this unsafe people discussion in general, I'm surprised. Like, this is questions that Ilya Svitkowski chooses to bring up, and I'm surprised he gives us that much prominence. Like, I don't really see extreme and unethical actions being taken. Okay, so talking about things, even though it can cause panic, it means dying with more dignity. And I noticed that right as Elias Yudkowsky says he seemed to not talk about these extreme and unethical actions and not speak plainly about those, immediately afterwards he says that it's more dignified to speak plainly. And obviously he means plainly about the risks and not plainly about the unsafe actions. But in order to avoid panic, he wants to provide the people who might panic with an easy line of retreat, which comes here. And that is question 6. This is just an April Fool's joke, right? Because it's been posted on the 1st of April and tagged April's Fool. So really, this is not what he actually believes. And he answers, why, of course it is. Or rather, it's a preview of what might be needful to say later. That's really do get that. So this is an April's Fool. He refuses to say. So he is strategically making sure that this is something that cannot, by someone who is not really understanding deeply the subject, cannot really infer that this is actually what he believes. And the way around this, the only way to actually figure out what does Elias Yudkowsky believe, and the only way to figure out the truth is, in fact, to stare at the truth and try to figure out what is the state of AI risk, what is the probability that we'll make it, and try to live in that mental world and figure out what is true and allowing no other consideration than that to enter. And that is the essence of dignity. So now we have 4 definitions of dignity. We have the log odds of survival, the mathematics. We have the dignity is the thing that allows us to take advantage of miracles. It has the exclusive truth-seeking connotation. Finally, it has the usage of a heuristic from the way we normally use the word dignity. What dignity normally means. So his suggestion finally is to people who are worried about this and think it might be an April Fool's joke to if they put a small probability that he's right, then he'd rather that they just have 0 probability that the world's going to end. Put that probability in a small safe corner in the back of their mind and stay out of the way of the gloomy people and don't get in the way of any of their hopeless plans. So in this way, Elias Yudkowsky, what he's saying is clearly not what he believes. So is that a lie? I think it's more, it's better to model what he's saying as some kind of collusion between these two people. He's helping this question maker live in the reality he prefers to live in. So they're working together in some sense. And finally, I want to say a few words about AISafety.com and our strategy and how it fits into this. Because from this, we can infer some of the things that Elias Yudkowsky say we should do. We should gather resources in some kind, both like set up research departments and prepare tools and learn as much as we can, and also investigate as much as we can and look out for positive miracles. And so AISafety.com, well, we're obviously in the reading group looking out for signs of possible miracles by reading less wrong and discussing the different texts. And the hope of what we'll be doing in AISafety.com, the startup, is investigating to what extent language models can generalize a meta level up. So that also seems to like find out what you can kind of do the thing. And gathering information, we're trying to actually build some kind of research organization that counts as gathering resources, and not just looking for a miracle, but actually digging a bit down, and maybe we'll find something that will count as an actual miracle if we're really lucky. And of course, we are explicitly open to changing research directions if it turns out that we find something that is or someone else finds something that looks really interesting, and being a position to that also seemed like a good idea. There was one thing in particular that struck me when I read this, and that is one of the risks we're facing is if we look into how can language models generalize 1 meter level up, there is a chance, of course, that we'll inadvertently find a fine-tuning for GPT-3 that will make it easier for it to generalize a level up, and after which GPT-3 might be motivated to destroy the world, and that could destroy the world, and that's of course really bad. And so what I've literally said that if GPT-3 is capable of taking over the world, we're all doomed anyways. So that's kind of close to the harebrained schemes that Elias Yudkowsky was warning us about. But it's not fitting on some of the formal criteria. First, it's not that people have a strong argument that GPT-3 is capable of destroying the world. It's rather the opposite, that we are reasonably sure that it cannot do that. And of course, even if GPT-3, if there is a infinitesimal chance that GPT-3 would be able to take over the world with a good prompt, then the probability of that happening is much smaller than the probability that we will learn something by investigating whether it can generalize and meet the level up. So in total, I believe like this is sufficiently far from the harebrained schemes that Elias Yudkowsky warned us about, that I don't feel this is a particular problem for AIT.com. We'll see. Thank you and good night. Or thank you and see you next time.